सो हम अभी शुरू करेंगे मार्क्स के बारे में। सो मार्क्स के बारे में शुरू करते हैं। हम पर्टिकुलरली एक वर्ड का यूज़ करते हैं, दैट इज हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म। सिंपल लिखेंगे, इट इज़ इट कैन डिफाइन एज इकोनॉमिक फैक्टर शेप हिस्ट्री एंड ही इज गिविंग द साइंटिफिक एक्सप्लेनेशन ऑफ हिस्ट्री. This term is in context of criticizing idea, and that is a Hegel's theory. And he will say that Hegel is standing on his head, he should stand on his feet. And also he criticizes the philosopher, like philosopher don't tell the truth, only construct the truth. And they giving the false consciousness, like a religion, opiomosis. So philosopher only interpreted the world, what matters how to change the world. So then the most important line, like not our consciousness that determine existence, our existence should determine our consciousness. So that is a false consciousness, material existence, and the true consciousness. Then the debate, like Gandhi Harijan debate, Dr. Ambedkar press class debate. And the core thing that we have to focus, like Hegel emphasizing on idea will say state is a march of on earth, and it is a false consciousness. As said by Marx, based on matter, state is the executive committee of bourgeois class. So it is better to develop our true consciousness, that is material existence of worker, and this will develop when capitalism extreme condition में होगा, and this will convert class in itself into class for itself. And as per the law of dialectics, capitalism will move towards its end. So the statement like not our consciousness determine our existence, our existence should determine our consciousness. This shows Marx ontology, that is conception of reality, and theology, that is a purpose. And also, in order to understand history, man has to live. In order to live, man has to eat. In order to eat, man has to produce. So this whole lines showing the importance of creation of society. Basic structure here is production, and there is a social act that can't be done in isolation. So the creation of society is basically for need for production. There is materialistic needs. Therefore, society equals to division of labor. Division of labor is such that if the basic structure is feudal, then the superstructure where family will be joint and religion belong to Catholic, and economy is also feudal. If the basic structure is capitalist, then nuclear family, Protestant religion, and modern state concept like modern economy. So he will give the superstructure and basic structure model, and basic structure is economic in nature, and superstructure is not independent, it is automatically changed when basic structure will change. And that's why he is criticized by the others as economic determinism, as said by Max Weber, that he is giving mono-causal explanation of history by Marx. It is simplistic, and Karl Popper even called Marx equals to enemy of open society. His theory not open for falsification. So till now we have discussed Marx historical materialism, like criticizing the Hegel, then not our consciousness Wally line, and telling that it is the Hegel and Marx debate. Now we have focused more on the Marx structural model, and here we emphasize on the economic structure, basic structure. The components of basic structure is like force of production, means of production, relation of production. Force of production is like technology, manpower, steam engine. Means of production is land, labor, capital, enterprise. And relation of production is the important, and that is a class. So all social relations are relation of production, and their relation of production are shaped by his standing with respect to means of production. Therefore either have or have not. ये लाइन हमें ऐसे ही लिखनी है. All social relation are relation of production, and the relation of production are shared by his standing with respect to means of production, that is either have or have not, either exploiter or exploited, and exploited equals to workers. So workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose, accept your chains. And here chains means religion, ideology, nation. So these all are false consciousness. So Marx has emphasized on these terms like false consciousness, ideology is false consciousness, and workers of world unite, showing the common interest. He has used the term proletarian internationalism. And with this, he will emphasize on anti-national, anti-religion stance. Anti-national means nationalism is by ideology of bourgeois class, and anti-religion because for him religion is opium is ideology based. Therefore, the relation between have and have not is struggle, dialectical, not harmonious existence. So another term that is very important, that is the dialectical materialism. In dialectical materialism, he explains the nature of movement in history. Dialectics here means struggle, struggle inherent, non-external factor, teleological, definite plan and definite end, old and new interlinked, and it ends where contradiction ends. And Marx adopted all the three principles of dialectics given by Hegel. However, dialectics of matter, not idea. Three law of dialectics by Marx is like unity of opposite, negation of negation, and quantity change into quality. So unity of opposite like reason for motion, the motion that is happening. Negation of negation is like movement towards progress. So you are moving towards progress. And quantity change into quality like things which appear entirely new are rooted in the old. So new thing will appear that was, yeah, has been in the old structure. So he used dialectics to show class struggle, and the class struggle is inevitable, and to inspire workers. Inspire workers here, the workers are bound to win because they are on the right side of history, and that is law of dialectics. And exploited, that is the workers are progressive class for Marx. And he's given a particular famous line, history of all Hatito is to existing history of all Hatito to existing society has been the history of class struggle. And no birth without blood, violence is midwife of change, midwife of change. And here there is clear influence of Darwin's theory of evolution. He has given the phases like prehistoric age, primitive communism, slave society. In the slave society, there are two classes: master and slave, where slaves are progressive class, change oriented. Feudal society, lord and serfs, progressive class, change oriented. And capitalist society, capitalist and worker pay workers are progressive class, change oriented. So since class exists, so class struggle. That's why he will emphasize on revolution, complete change, total revolution, wholesale social engineering, all components of model of production change. With this, superstructure change automatically. So here Marx has said the importance of revolution. Also, as per Marx, bourgeois class once a revolutionary class and prevails in French Revolution by science and technology. However, after coming to power, they turned staticist. They turned staticist. So, so there are two classes: exploiter, dominant class, and exploited. The other class, progressive class. But with the revolution, the exploiter will become exploiter will be changed by the exploited. Like where exploiter were dominant capitalists, now the exploiter will be taken by other class. Like where two class exist after the revolution, that is a transitional stage. And here is the socialist model of production. So with this, now we focus on like Marx is both revolutionary as well as evolutionary. When I say the Marx is revolutionary, he simply means that the status of exploited and exploiter is changing, where now the two classes exist after revolution, and here comes the transitional stage, that is a socialist model of production. And later this will be known as the dictatorship of proletarian. So simple means the now state equals to instrument of working class and law in interest of workers to abolish the private property, because private property was the source of exploitation. And with this they will move towards the ultimate state as the communism, that through communism. And this is the evolutionary stage, peaceful gradual change, ideal state equals to perfect equality, perfect freedom, that is a classless, stateless. So it is also said that where Marxism ends, anarchism begins, because there is classless and stateless. So he will distinguish between Gandhi, as Gandhi also said, but he said in a positive way, where Gandhi will emphasize on horizontal distribution of power. Power is expanding, ever expanding, never ascending, like ocean circulation, self-help group, voluntary associations, and corporations based on essential good human nature and can live in peace without any struggle, unlike Hobbes and Marx. So, in socialism, that is a dictatorship or proletarian, from each according to his ability to each according to his work apply, and in communism, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. With this, we will move towards his concept of alienation. So, to understand his concept of work, we need to understand his concept of alienation, given in his book Economy and Philosophic Manuscript. Here, we have to focus on that the Marx here is young Marx, humanist analysis of human nature, that is a social by nature, cooperative spirit against capitalist system. And also here is the influence of Hegel, like Hegel said, obey a law made by state. State is God, march on earth. And Fubach, F-U-B-A-C-H, he said God equals to cause of alienation. Because man compare with God and he finds something is missing in him. But Marx said capitalism is the root cause. Because capitalism causes feeling of estrangement, capitalism takes away the scope of a realization of very basic element of human nature. So the basic thing is to focus on the human nature part, and he's saying that human nature is not developing now because of the capitalism. So man has become the cog of wheel, fetishism of communities, fetishism. That is the separation from oneself, dissatisfaction and unhappiness. Therefore, there is need to end the capitalism to end alienation, and to realization of human existence will develop with this. Therefore, itself, but there is a problem that capitalists are itself constrained by the structure. So, appeal to consciousness, like what Gandhi emphasized, will not going to happen as per the Marx. So, he will said the only option is revolution. Because of alienation, the people are alienated from process of production. So there, because there is mass production, no scope of individuality, and they are producing for the market and become the cock of the wheel. And from product of labor also they are alienated, like everything is specialization production. So no visualize what shape his labor has taken. And also then an alienation from society, because working conditions such no realization for his social nature, and from oneself at the last, no just worker, but even capitalists are also alienated from oneself. So Marx said that capitalism standing, capitalism digging their own grave, because they are full of contradictions, will develop, will destroy itself, and the revolution is inevitable. Like the revolution against capitalism only in the society where capitalism is fully advanced. If the capitalism is fully advanced, and then only revolution will happen. Because when it fully advanced, the contradiction will come into the surface. So with this, the class in itself become class for itself. Class in itself means low level consciousness, aware of his own class and distinguished himself from other. But in class for itself, like what happened in Indian modern history, quitting movement, extreme consciousness now has been developed. So consciousness of exploitation reaches to extreme and critical mass is reached. That is, a polarization of classes has been happened. Because in the capitalism, the petty bourgeois class will further become proletarian. Earlier owned, now propertyless, because now they are propertyless, petty bourgeois class. So nature is, there is huge imbalance, small group entire wealth holding. So law of nature, like nothing remains in state of disequilibrium. Therefore, revolution will happen and quantity change into quality. You can't grow without destroying old. So what we have learned in this, like there are contradictions. So contradiction like production, In the production, the satisfaction of need versus the profit-driven system based on greed. Work which is source of happiness become the source of alienation. And in this cutthroat competition, contradiction between and man become the source of threat. And machine became the reason for displacement of man itself. So men are compelled to work at further lower wages, and labor of work, part of personality, becomes bargaining power to capitalist, which will increase pain and alienation for workers. So as capitalist advances, more and more contradiction come to surface. Capitalism seeks the cycle of boom and bust because capitalist mode of production lot of goods in the market but people lack purchasing power. So surplus value hold by capitalist and volatile value in a particular good is created by labor done on it like log. So capitalists have the surplus value, and with this they are volatile principle where value in a particular good is created by labor done on it. So labor done on by the worker but value holding by the capitalist. So no equitable distribution. So solution is socialism where surplus to the worker, and then communism where production according to need and not market. And with this what will happen, like freedom here we have to understand liberation where freedom is individualistic sense, like right of individual. So Marx has said the bourgeois concept is freedom lies in the notion of right. For Marx, society becomes a source of insecurity in capitalist society, and man need protection in form of right against society. And for Marx society means source of happiness, and because man is social by nature, therefore no requirement of right against society. And he said this because the concept of right against society is itself the source cause of alienation that separate man from society, creates false sense of happiness, freedom. So for Marx, happiness of man inseparable from happiness of society, and this also means the moral freedom. This moral freedom was originated in Rousseau, where self equals part of whole, general will inseparable from real will, means freedom lies in realization of true self. And the whole conclusion, like freedom doesn't mean right, or rather pressure of certain conditions like classless, stateless society, liberation of society as whole, and this means emancipation at a social change, structural change, liberation of not just individual but of humanity, society. So no conflict between man and society. Now we will, with this we have covered the important parts of Marxism, but the some important things that I have prepared, we will discuss that in easy way. Like uh, there is a question like ideology is a false consciousness. So ideology here from science to propaganda, as I've discussed. So I will bring this video very soon where the ideology has moved from science to propaganda. I will write something about it, and then we will say that say Hegel's critique like state is march of God on earth, criticized by Marx that all our consciousness, welfare, existence, that all debate. Then we'll say that uh, basic just model given class to alienation part, historical materialism part. Marx will explain on this. Then we will say like true consciousness should be developed by worker to get emancipation. Then we introduce Gandhi Harijan Ambedkar debate where it is mostly on the base of ideology, where Ambedkar will say that Gandhi is building ideology, false consciousness by calling Harijans by calling depressed classes as Harijans. And then we will end the debate with the like Marx emphasizing on true consciousness to annihilation and bring communism through revolution. He is both revolutionary and evolutionary. So in a single question, we have to introduce all the part slowly and in a symmetrical manner. So there are questions on like the Marx concept of alienation is an essential part of reality of capitalism. And yes, the Marx concept of alienation is an essential part of capitalism. We will write all the points of capitalism, contradictions point, and how it causing the alienation, and what Marx suggested revolution in an firstly the socialism and then communism. All the things should be written in this question. And in 2016 there is a question like explain Marx concept of human essence and alienation. So yes, he has said emphasized on the human essence part as a young Marx, and he said also said on alienation part, like with capitalism we are alienated from the production, from society and oneself, and with the product also. So, and he's suggesting like revolution. And in 2009 there is a question explain in detail Marx prescription for ending alienation. So what they have prescribed how to end the alienation. So Marx view on alienation are like the young Marx we all know given a book European philosophical manuscript, and dealing with questions like freedom and equality, liberty to make profit versus equality. The main thing is like alienation is estrangement on separation from it's from self. Okay, and he will say capitalism freedom is false consciousness alienation. Source of influence Hegel and Feuerbach have that we have discussed, like man is alienated from God, need for high consciousness, realize that universe is spread in the state. This all will be said by Hegel, and the Feuerbach said a young Hegelian understand Hegel from new perspective. God and religion are source of alienation because he said rejection of a religion, real habitation of man. And for Marx, carried forward Feuerbach's view, rejection of just religion not enough. True freedom lies freedom from capitalist system. Capitalism, alienation of worker, alienation of capitalists equals to alienation of all. Pain felt by capitalists is less troublesome than worker might not want to increase wages, but no choice left for capitalism itself. So there is a Piketty work highlights how capitalism can create a system where small elite control wealth and power, contributing to feeling of alienation for those left behind. So feeling of alienation because the capitalism is creating a system, small elite group, wealth, power all in his hand. So capitalism like alienates kill human essence. Why bad is capitalism? Capitalism dehumanizing man, objectification of labor. So capitalist society interaction between two men, the buyer and seller, freedom only when act according to true nature. But there is no such freedom lies in capitalism. Two essential qualities of man like creative and social by nature, but both are ended by capitalism. Because the cog of the will that have in terms we have introduced freedom of movement commodification. So human distinct from animal shape their involvement through labor. Therefore, labor as a fundamental aspect of human existence. And we have said that it is a part of our personality. So this distinct part has been abolished by this capitalist system. So Marx view on profit like use value, capacity of commodity to satisfy needs. Okay, there is exchange value, amount of money a person willing to spend for it. Then comes the surplus value, that is the profit, exchange value minus use value. So Marx explanation of profit is like source of evil. Here profit is a source of evil. Capitalists make profit. He is not giving the surplus to anyone. They are working so long, but still poor conditions. Even with this work, they are increasing the bargaining power of capitalists. And you can say give some examples from the service right now happening, right? Dissatisfaction and disengagement with the job, negative mental health, also affecting this type of systems. And we know basically the alienation from process of production, cog in the wheel, all that working conditions so torturous from product of his labor. We don't know the final shape, society and the himself also. The how to end alienation. I said that ending alienation like first coming the socialism then communism, revolutionary phase. Okay, so communism is end of contradictions that capitalism is developing. So to alienate and alienation, abolition of property is a necessity that will happen in the socialism. So collective ownership and democratic control of equal distributed surplus value. So with this, when we abolish private ownership, collective ownership will happen, at democratic control to equally distribute surplus value. So the collective ownership and equally distributed surplus value will happen, and then will happen the full development of the human potential by cherishing the value of labor, and then will happen the social equality and elimination of class division, and then will happen the social relationship based on collaboration rather than exploitation. So the abolition of private ownership, equal distribution of surplus value, cherishing the value of labor, elimination of class division, and collaboration rather than exploitation. These all things will happen just a single act, that is abolition of private property. How communism will come, and is communism possible? So it is, some say it is European idea, some say it has never happened, some also say like where the communism took its root, the rulers are itself so authoritarian in nature. So real communism as said by Marx is not happening. So that's question also discussed by later Gramsci and Althusser. And then Marx will say concept of discuss the Karl Marx concept of class. So a class simply means like he said the means of production. There is a class struggle between classes have and have nots. He will also given the phases where he said there are two classes, and the classes there is a class struggle, and class struggle there is a nature of movement like dialectical movement. There is no harmonization. So the fundamental the aspect of his analysis of society, economy, and history is based on the class and individual relationship to the means of production that we have discussed. And with this, the class determines one's position in society, and the line that our constitution has determined that line. So class position is not static, but subject to historical economic changes. Like he has given example in this respect that once bourgeois was lower class with their scientific evolution they are able to become the progressive class. So it is dynamic. The class struggle arises from inherent conflict, dialectical, and with this there is mode of history. So historical materialism, dialectical materialism, these are the empirical evidence to show that different phases of history have been dominated by different classes, and class struggle is the highest form in capitalism, and thus through a proletarian revolution worker capture power. And he also emphasizes like history of all Hirto. So Marx used historical materialism for scientific understanding of history, like Bayes and superstructure model. We have discussed this. I call this method scientific of the philosophy, like criticizing the Hegel. So concept of class is like relation production, where have and have nots are there, exploited and exploited, progressed and statocist. Then only relationship between them is the dialectical, that is a struggle, no scope for reconciliation. And history of Alvarito existing society is the history of class struggle. History that is a class struggle, how history changes according to Marx. Historical change is change in the means of production. That is a so it basically means like class struggle, how history change. And there he is given the concept of dialectics, like contradiction is the moving force of history. And the factor of change is new force of production emerging. Sometimes coexist gradually, one becomes fitter on the new, and the new class emerge. Class struggle coexist for some time, beyond that not possible. And he given the traces based on history like prehistoric age, primitive communism, common ownership of means of production, no class divided, state not required at that time, abundant resources, no conflict. Why concept of primitive communism? Once man was living without private property, so man can live still life without property. Abundance means no competition, no conflict. Abundance is negative here. And using Marx communism, so with the abundance there is no competition, no conflict, because there is no private ownership. And but for Marx, industrialization is good, but for Gandhi, he did not favor the industrialization. And he gave an example of slave, master and slave, feudal. We had discussed this capitalist class also. And with this, he'll say that comes socialism. And socialism, greatest concept of socialism, like this is transition state, dictatorship, or proletariat. It will come by violent revolution, and also capitalism. Then there will two classes, workers and capitalists, and here the position has been changed. So conditions, capitalism, exploited, capitalist exploiters, where workers exploited state by capitalist, and in socialism, workers exploiters, capitalists exploited state controlled by workers, and now they have to abolish the private property. The system of distribution like the socialism from each according to his capacity to each according to work. We have discussed that, and capitalism like workers are forced to work beyond their capacity and not paid according to their work because now the system is controlled by the workers. So nature of state like the capitalism, democracy is for minority and dictatorship of minority of majority. And in socialism there is a democracy for majority and dictatorship of majority of a minority. So there is a person Friedrich Engels ENGELS, the origin of family, private properties and state 884 states. He states that the state is a product of class society and serve as the organized power of the economic dominant class to maintain exploitation. So the state is a product of class society and serve as the organized power of economically dominated class to maintain exploitation. So in the state, there will be a dominant class, and that dominant class is economically dominant class, and that will cause exploitation on the other class. And this same thing is happening in capitalism and also in socialism now. Only the position has been changed. In capitalism, the workers are exploited. In socialism, now the workers are exploiters. Okay, then will come the show communism. We know that a peaceful manner gradual shift. Private property abolished, classes abolished, no class struggle, end of class struggle, end of politics, end of history, end of contradiction, points of ultimate synthesis, no communism. So communism is the ultimate stage. Like what has been later been said by the Francis Fukuyama that liberalism is the ultimate stage. So similarly, Marx has had said in the past that communism is the ultimate state, highest point in man's material and ideological evolution. State shall wither away. State created by popular classes no role to play. So the SSG volunteer organization have to play the role. So communism is something anarchism we have discussed that lawlessness. No, so anarchy is not lawlessness; it is absolute freedom for Marx. Okay, the system of distribution for each according to his capacity to each according to his need. So communism society, everybody get things according to need. So society take care of needs of the people. Jarurat. So production is for the need, not to greed, and this element of greed that were happened in capitalism now has been abolished with the abolition of private property. So we will also link with Gandhi in upon the earth, but for greed there is nothing left. So Marx view on our revolution now. The revolution mode of production changes. Capitalism to socialism, the mode of production changes. We know. Revolution capitalism is like only when capitalism fully developed, contradiction will come to surface. We have discussed that, and now we have developed the true consciousness. There is class consciousness. Two stages like in consciousness, class in itself, class for itself. Class in itself means lower level consciousness. Okay, that we have to link with CDM and NCM. A class for itself like taking up arms, like Cuban movement. The class in itself, class for itself, exploitation increases with the increase of exploitation. Their consciousness also increases. So the difference between Marx and Lenin is also we have to discuss here. Like type of society, Marx said capitalist society. Lenin brought it in Russia, which was a semi-feudal society. So Russia was a semi-feudal society where capitalism was brought by Lenin because capitalism was not well there. Consciousness, Marx wait for the development of class consciousness. Wait. Lenin say, I can't wait. I am impatient. So he had the thought of manufacturing consciousness. So not on consciousness, but they have to develop consciousness. For Marx, spontaneous evolution, no leader, masses to lead themselves, like Cuban movement. So spontaneous, not one type of slavery for other. So Lenin say there is a concept of Communist Party. middle class intellectual, developing consciousness in masses. So because of Lenin, dictatorship of Communist Party got developed. So Lenin emphasis on developing consciousness concept of Communist Party and bringing the capitalism in Russia, which was semi-feudal society, making him also the Peter Hodenite his master. So our approach of bourgeois has simplified antagonism. This line means advancement of capitalism. Capitalism full of contradiction, digging their own grave. We have discussed this. This is the same thing. So as capitalism advances, contradiction become apparent. Illusion about it disappear. So we know that now contradiction. Middle class bourgeois, small capitalists become proletarian intent. And the society also two conflict classes. The class in itself, class for itself, and then become the revolution. So capitalism has heightened and simplified the division between the two main classes, making the class struggle more obvious and sharpening the antagonism. As the gap between the bourgeois and the proletariat grows, the potential for revolutionary change become more likely. So capitalism developing such conditions that we have discussed the contradiction part. That contradiction will ultimately change the class in itself for class for itself, and then the revolution will begin. So is communism practically possible? According to Marx, it is possible. Supports industrialization also by Marxism. Machines will create abundance for fulfill the needs in communism of every person. And also communism is perfect freedom. So in this concept of perfect freedom, so he's getting freedom from necessities. Man is free when he does not have to worry about the satisfaction of his basic need. So only then he can do what he wants. The freedom in capitalist society is false consciousness, because in that man was cock of the wheel. There was no source of pleasure from the work. Man was not creative by nature and capitalist. In capitalism, man dehumanizes himself from society and from himself. So there is a need of complete freedom, and for Marx it is possible with the end of private property. So Marx analysis of capitalism. Capitalism, he said, simply said, dig their own grave. He said capitalism digging out a grave, contradiction is happening, and with this, a class will change itself towards self. We all have discussed that, and capitalism bad for the society, dehumanizing its people, causing alienation. Okay, so here capitalism is full of contradiction, hence about to end. No, there is a known Chomsky. He said capitalism is profit greater than people. Profit is the engine of capitalism. Noam Chomsky, ठीक है? And there is origin. In the origin, scientific and industrial revolution happened, and Marx even appreciated the bourgeois class productive capacity increased. Like bourgeois was has been appreciated by the Marx, but problem lies the production and individual level. Little surplus exchange, the surplus theory, machine durable and cheap, and decreasing the availability of labor, making the wages more low. Factory system replaced the cotton industry, so poor suffered. People no land, no capital, only labor to sell, and this labor exploited by the capitalist. So there is objectification, commodification of labor. People with the capital benefit without exploited. So capitalism may profit important to work, as said by the Noam Chomsky. So how capitalism move towards is death, because profit is the engine of capitalism. So increase profit, lowering of cost of production. So they are reducing the wages. So capitalist law of wages is like giving only as much sufficient for survival, no surplus. Only that amount is given that will make the worker to survive and work for the next day. So wages already low need to be secured more, because it's based on the concept of profit. So displacement of worker by machines, and when capitalism does more to follow, the other people will also follow, like displacing the people. So more worker available, even lower wages, they will compelled to work. So when the progress of capitalism increasing exploitation of worker. So benefit of one is simply the at the expense of at the cost of the exploitation of other. So face crisis at regular interval. So after a time, small capitalist petty bourgeois class, worker, middle class, they become the proletariats. Exploitation reach extreme, and then the class in class for it, so then become the revolution. So criticized by the Marx Weber like you were giving the mono casual exploitation. As capitalism advances, proletariation of classes and not exploitation. और क्लासेस उभर के आएंगी. सो कैपिटलिज्म इज द मोस्ट रैशनल वे ऑफ लाइफ, मार्क्स वेपर बोलता है ये. और इसको उल्टा में नॉर्मन चास्की बोलता है कि कैपिटलिज्म इज बेस्ड ऑन द प्रॉफिट एंड एक्सप्लॉयटेशन विल बी हैपेंड. मार्क्स वेबर कह रहा है कि नो, capitalism is a more rational way of life. So we will end this by saying that the other scholars will bring more dimensions like the intersectionality of class with other social categories, gender, race, culture. Then this will bring the concept of like feminism and multiculturalism. There is a question like Marx treat individual primarily as a member of class. Yes, he has treated individual as a primarily as a member of class, and his whole theory is based on that in the society one is dominant class, economic based, and other is exploited class. All class struggle inevitable. Particularly analyze his view on economic man. An economic man is like the capitalist man, capitalism bad, exploiting. So class concept, relationship of production, have nots, economic man, revolution of the system, mode of production, capitalism is bad. And this criticized by like Marx Weber economic determinism and monoclass explanation. But his relevance is also there, like to keep the capitalism humane. So here Marx actually challenged that the idea that individuals are solely driven by their economic interest, as what said by the classical liberal theorists. And he said that under capitalism individuals are alienated from the product of his labor, and that we all discussed, and degrading the human potential. So instead of reducing individual to economic man, Marx emphasized the importance of social relations, broader context in which individuals operate. And with this, he emphasized a communist society. Okay, we have to interlink all the concepts. Then comes their line that man makes his own history, but does not make it in freely chosen circumstances. He makes history in given circumstances. So this line, the same thing, like we have discussed. Not our consciousness that determine our existence. Our existence should determine our consciousness. So not our consciousness that determine existence. So the existence part, like the basic structure part, if you or have not, your existence is exploited by the exploiter. So your history will be on the backside. So it reinforces the idea of historical materialism, where the material and economic base of society largely determine the possibilities and limits of human action. So what you can do and not do will be depend on your economic base and your material existence. So two contradicting views like man is not free to make history depend on the basic structure of society. So capitalist society actions constrained by logic of capitalism. The same thing we have discussed in critique of economic man. But here it is also optimistic, like recognizing the role of human action. Workers can understand the true nature condition. Like worker can develop the true consciousness all in this whole understanding. Generate true consciousness by revolution, overthrow capitalism in the end. So one side he is optimistic, and other side he is also like signing us that in capitalism the things are bad. But optimistic like the thing can be improved with the development of true consciousness. So we will emphasize on the criticism of Marx, like Marx analysis neglect the diverse motivations and complexity of individual behavior. His economic determinism, and there are multiple factors like culture, values, personal experience, and not just the economy is the only factor. And Marx like overshadow the unique experience and aspirations of individuals, overlook the diversity and individuality, and his analysis of history is simplistic, as also said by the Gramsci and Althusser, which will literally emphasizes on more broader understanding of history. And in this also Roy criticized like feminist, fascist, suppress men in the name of nature, and communist in the name of laws. That is the suppressing the individuality in the name of laws. So now we will discuss the most important question like the difference between liberty and freedom. So discuss Marx's notion of freedom. So we also discussed that he said the right against the society, something discussed by the libertarian notion, and he emphasized on emancipation, like ending the capitalist system, the based suffering, all that. So liberty is the core value of human liberalism, where classical liberalism promote liberty, like state, minimal state. Social liberalism will say social liberalism will promote positive liberty, state hinder the hindrances. We'll know that part about liberty. And freedom in Marxism term is like emancipation to end the alienation. That we know that the capitalist society transformed to cashless and say society. Why bad human essence? We all discussed that. Marx's notion of freedom is like de-alienation. Okay, and hence Marx freedom from the necessity ability to enjoy the product and process of creation, because man is by his social nature and creative, all that. And also Aristotle criticism of communism, we will introduce some little part there, like everyone property no one responsibility will happen in communism, like we criticizing now communism part. However, Rawls liberty as first principle, we all know that, where he was citing that liberty should be the first principle in his um, idea. No one support equality behind wheel of ignorance. So nevertheless, Marx analysis of freedom provides important critique of capitalist society, that it keeps human capitalism human, wise raised by trade unions organization. Okay, there is a question like it is not conscious that determine our all that we have discussed also. So it is not consciousness that determine our existence, but it is our existence that determine our consciousness. So this is the central concept of materialistic conception of history. So we all know historical materialism, like economic interpretation of history. Marx explain history because Marx want to change history. One should know how history changed, how history changes scientifically to make a scientific explanation of action. For Marx, historical materialism like science, however, contradicting Hegel's view of history, like his history, dialectical movement of ideas. Marx, like Hegel, is standing on his head, need to make him stand on his feet. No idea, but matter that shapes reality. It is not a consciousness, वगैरह वगैरह, and consciousness जो है what we think and existence, but we are second. Consciousness is a true consciousness. So Marx is like eschatology and ontology. Marx materialistic idea जो है वो false consciousness है, and he will say like Hegel is not rational, standing on his head, and state is not a god. State is a source of exploitation. State is bourgeois exploited hand. So Marx used historical materialism for scientific understanding of history, base and superstructure model. We have discussed all that. So ideological cause consciousness, Gandhi Ambedkar debate, which Marx emphasizing benefits not product of individual choice, rather influenced by material condition and social relation, have and have nots. So people believe not product of individual choices, rather influenced by material condition and social relations in which they exist. That is the have and have nots. So Gramsci and Althusser criticized it. He said Gramsci, we all know the culture also plays a role to build hegemony. Althusser has emphasized like lived experience, like idea become reality. So we can't just neglect idea. So commentary also said cultural part. So he again we criticizing the Marx here that we had discussed just few minutes ago. Here commentary criticizing that community also matter, culture also matter. Even inherent access focus on economic sphere hampers political action. We all discussed that, and it brings totalism, no freedom. Therefore, the role of ideational factors, political ideologies, cultural values, social movement in shaping social and political changes. However, Marx inspired feminists to raise their voice against patriarchy, keep capitalism humane, and even Thomas Piketty utilized Marx's view to show rising inequalities. So this is an important question, and this will be the last question because after this, everything is repeated in one note. So Marx's work could be seen as compound of three elements: German philosophy, English political economy, and French socialism. So, like in German philosophy, there is a conception of history, materialistic conception of history, aligns with green philosophy in its emphasis on material material conditions and productive forces shaping societal development. So, materialistic conception of history is something given by green philosophy. So, English political economy says dialectical materialism. Marx synthesized the principle of English political economy, particularly the works of economists like Adam Smith and David Ricardo, into his dialectical materialistic approach. He extended and transferred economic ideas into a broader analysis of historical development and also the labor theory of value. Marx incorporation of the labor theory of value from the English political economy became a cornerstone of his critique of capitalism, expanding the source of surplus value exploitation, explaining the source of surplus value and exploitation. The emphasis is on the labor as a source of value, resonate with the English political economic generation. So labor emphasis and dialectical materialism is from English political man, and French socialism is saying about the revolutionary spirit. So Marx's engagement with French social thought, especially the work of thinkers like Henri de Saint Simon and Charles Fourier Fourier contributed to the revolutionary spirit embedded in his theory. The French socialist tradition influenced Marx's vision of social transformation and class struggle. The concept of communism draws from the European socialist ideas prevalent in French socialist thought. So communism, social transformation, class struggle, revolutionary spirit is from French socialism. So dialectical materialism, the philosophical underpinning of his work, serve as a synthesis of these three elements. So the three elements like material conception of history, then the dialectical materialism, revolutionary spirit. Dialectics derived from the German. So that was not Greek, that was German. German philosophy merged with materialism to provide a methodology for understanding the dynamism of matter historical change. So Marx, however, sought to ground these ideals in a scientific analysis of human development. And also in this conclusion, we will say it highlights the interdisciplinary nature of Marx's thought. The synthesis of these elements form the basis for his comparative analysis of history, economic and social transformation. Also in the contemporary relevance, critique of consumer culture like globalization and class structure. In the context of globalization, Marx's idea contributed to inform debate about the superstructure transformation of class structure on global scale. So in the relevance part, we will say collapse of communism, USSR. We all know Marxism, utopianism never implemented it since 1991. Expansion of neoliberalism, hegemonic ideology. So collapse of communism and neoliberalism. Scholar like discipline of history wrong to say why, because 2008 economic crisis again came back. Question mark on neoliberal globalization. So renewed interest in Marx. Then comes Thomas Piketty and his book Capital in 21st Century. He said the relevance of Marxian ideas. So anti-capitalist movement being witnessed around the world at that time. So communism, antithesis, capitalism, critique of capitalism, keep it humanitarian. So when we say it is utopia, so not utopia it has never been implemented. Even if utopia does not undermine its relevance, because it is source of motivation for the exploited class. So Karl Popper says enemy of open society and of freedom. Communism is perfect freedom. One side we saying it is a perfect freedom, but Karl Popper says it is the and of freedom, because it is determinism and not open to falsification. So there is a concept like for socialist human nature is social and for capitalist human nature is individualistic. For socialist society is natural and for capitalist society is artificial as a result of contract. So in dialectical materialism we said that Marx says dialectics is inherent in nature. So there is no external stimuli required. This external stimuli was something that was discussed Hobbes like movement of matter because of external stimuli. So but Marx says there is no need of external stimuli, it is inherent. So in dialectical materialism there is a contradiction among classes on the basis of progress of history. And this is the basis, of progress of history because there is contradiction. Inherent dialectic. So progressive and reactionary, progressive exploitative, reactionary exploiter. So there is negation of negation. Working class are sure to win. So he says workers of the world unite, all that. But our view will be Marx's explanation, not scientific, using history to justify his politics. As something said by Karl Marx also criticized Marx for committing guilt of historicism. So what does the West say on democracy? Socialists like Western democracy is plutocracy. Capitalists say socialist democracy, authoritarianism and totalitarianism. In all countries, communist evolution, like socialism, supposed to be temporary, became permanent. So instead of dictatorship, dictatorship, Communist Party emphasized and happened. Instead of power to masses, power with elites observed. So here we have to criticize more on communism by saying this. With this, we have completed all the clear concept of Marxism. Marx.